Stampers and crafters, welcome to Tina's Crafty Ink Spot. We are on session 3, episode 3 of our Stampin' Blends 101 course. Today we will be covering blending basics. If you missed session 1 or 2, I will have links below. Session 1 was marker charting. That is where we created charts to not only inventory our markers, but to create swatches for easy reference in coloring our images. I did both the natural tones and our regular Stampin' blends. You'll need those today, so go ahead and pull them out. Session 2, we did light source. And light source, what we did is we went over how to create shadows and cast shadows based on the direction of the light and what a light source is, what shadowing is, midtones, shadows, highlights, and cast shadows. We went over that in episode 2. Now we are on episode, there's our light source. We are on episode 3, so let's jump right in. In this episode, we are going to go over the basics of how to use your Stampin' Blend markers, how to blend them correctly, and some different techniques to do with them that you can do blending. So our first that we want to cover is the marker itself, so that when I'm saying use your bullet tip or feather tip or tip to tip, you know what I'm talking about. So on your markers, one, you're going to have the color of the marker itself. It'll also have the name on it. I guess I could do it to where you guys can read it. This one happens to be dark pumpkin pie. Although these markers, like I mentioned in the last session, have the color of the marker, when you do your color chart, you might notice that the color isn't quite the same as once it's on paper. Okay, that was another reason for doing our chart. I also gave you in session 1 this little PDF where you can put the names of your markers, the names on the ends of your marker caps. It kind of helps twofold. If you have several markers open, you know which cap goes to which marker, and when it's sitting in your holder, you have quick, easy read of it instead of looking at going, wow, is that Cajun or is that orange? Entirely up to you. I just supplied you the PDFs in case you wanted to use them. So today we're going to go over using our bullet tip and using our feather tip. Now, a majority of the time with what we do as stampers is going to be smaller images. So I'm going to say about 98% of the time you're probably going to use the bullet tip. I like the feather tip. As you get going and you practice a little, you'll figure out which one you prefer to use, and it's entirely up to you. Now, the first question everybody asks me when they ask me about coloring is whether or not I color light to dark or dark to light. Personally, I color dark to light. I have some specific reasons why, but what I'm going to tell you is it doesn't matter. You're going to get the same result whether you color light to dark or dark to light. It's entirely up to you. What I will teach, though, is dark to light. And my reasoning behind that, even though I go over my images maybe a couple times so that I get a lot of depth and definition, if you're going dark to light, normally you're going to do your dark and then transition. If you're doing light to dark, normally you got to do the whole piece of what you're coloring with the light, then put in your midtones and then put in your dark, and often that means you have to redo it to get because so much saturation has maybe lifted some of the depth out of your color. And if you're having to use your markers 2 or 3 times to create what you want, going light to dark, to me you're wasting ink. Wasting ink means wasting money. But what I will say is you do what is comfortable for you. It works different for everybody, okay? So do what's comfortable to you. But I would suggest that you try it both ways. See which way is more comfortable for you. And when you're doing our little chart today, we're going to do a blending chart today. You have a lot of room to practice. But this chart is also going to work twofold, just so you know, that we are not only going to do this to do blending exercises where we learn to blend, we learn to do the feather stroke, we learn to do the flick stroke, we also learn to do tip to tip. Along with that is one, it's going to give you swatches. Swatches are if you grab an image. You have an image. You're going to try to want to know, okay, what colors do I want to use on this? So normally what you'll do is you'll grab a scrap piece of paper. And you're going to go, yeah, I don't really want orange. Okay, so I picked orange for this different one. Now I got to figure out all my color scheme and my blending scheme. You're going to create a swatch. It works better without just jumping in and risking putting the wrong color down. Oops, hold on, just do that on the floor. So anyway, this will work both as an exercise sheet and a swatch sheet. So what you can do, and what I do with mine, which I will do this not during the video, but I'm going to do swatches for several color families. Like I may do a couple swatches with some reds, a couple swatches with some yellows, greens, blues, etc. And it'll be a quick reference. If I pick up this little duck, then I'm going to go, oh, I want to use my yellow theme that I created here. Or I want to use my orange theme. Okay? Just a quick reference and a quick swatch sheet. So, as I mentioned, you have a nib tip and a feather tip. And it is listed on the marker which is which. And then you've got your name and your colored cap. Okay. What we will start with is I'm going to teach a couple different methods. I'm going to do the feather stroke first, and then I'm going to take you to the flick stroke. Okay, these different things can be used for different effects in your coloring. Okay, the flick stroke, for example, works good for hair or fur or maybe a little bit of texture in a flower petal or a leaf. Okay, that's what those mean. So we're going to jump in, and the first thing you want to do is you want to grab your color chart. Okay, we know that we want to do some oranges. Okay, maybe I want a light kind of orange here. Well, what Stampin' Up does is they give you two markers, the light and the dark. You kind of have to determine either your darker shadow or your lighter highlight. Okay, so there's got to be something on the end of this spectrum. Okay, so what you can do is go, well, I know I want to do orange, so maybe I want a little bit lighter. Maybe I want this orange to be my darkest and my shadows, the light pumpkin pie, to be my mid-tone, and we'll use pale papaya as a highlight, because as you see, it matches easier to the orange than, say, the mango melody. Okay, so that's where this comes in again. You can kind of realize that, okay, my evening evergreen probably really isn't going to go good with my Call Me Clover. It's not going to blend well. It's not going to blend or transition. So blending is basically you're transitioning your colors. So let's start, and that'll make sense. This will make sense. So I wanted the orange. So I know I want my dark pumpkin pie, my light pumpkin pie, and I think I want to start with let's go with dark pale papaya, because it's not going to be too bold of a transition in our highlight. So let's grab our dark pale papaya. We'll set our light over there because you could use all 4, but we're going to work with groups of 3 right now. We're going to work with our shadow, midtone, highlight. That's it. If you do those basics, adding any extras is just going to be just that, something extra that adds a little oomph. So what we want to do is, like I said, I work dark to light. And for now, I'm going to take my bullet tip and I'm going to create my legend. Okay, so over here, let me zoom in for you. Let me get you in here so you can see what we're coloring. Okay, so we're doing dark to light. So I've got my dark pumpkin pie. I'm going to go ahead and saturate that little square nicely. And I usually just take a marker, and this little line right here is for you to write which marker it is. Of course, I have to find a pen that's going to write. So I know that this is my dark pumpkin pie. And then I'm going to take my light pumpkin pie, fill in our square. And when you do this little legend is another way that you're going to see those colors real close to each other and make sure that they are going to transition okay. So we got our light pumpkin pie. And then our last one that we were going to use is our dark pale papaya. Okay. So now you want to transition these 3. I guess I should color in my pale papaya. I didn't do it. So there's our 3 colors, dark, midtone, highlights. So what you can do when you're learning is you know that you want to transition these 3 colors. So why don't we just break our box into thirds, okay? Just a visual reference. So when we use our feather tip, which is the feather stroke, we're going to take the feather tip of our marker, and I usually just kind of, so I stay in the lines, is I'll put a little line at the end of where I want to, start. And then I'm going to use the technique I showed you where I'm laying my marker on that 4th finger there. Now, even me, I am just trying to teach myself this. I saw it, and what I did notice is it works really good for keeping you from pushing down too hard on your markers. It seems to give you a little more control. So when your marker, you're working off the side of your feather tip, you're just going to flick your wrist, start it, flick, 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 and overlap it so that you've got a nice transition there. And by feathering, what it means is you're going to end your stroke in a lighter, more feathered ending. So when you're putting your marker down and you go like that, you lift up, it's automatically going to be lighter and feathered at the end. Okay? This is real important because it makes your blending just real smooth. So we're going to feather it to where our feather ends at the first of our third. Now it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. So you're going to take and flick your marker and create that feather at the end. Make sure you're nice and filled in there. And there's our feathered end. So now we'll grab our next color, which is our light pumpkin pie. Use the same feather tip. Okay, lay our marker off to the side a little here. We're going to go all the way back in there. And we're just going to feather that out. Go over that line several times. And see where we had that line? Now it's nice, smooth transition. Oh, and speaking of which, don't forget, see I have a clear acetate under here. Remember in the previous session I told you, if you color on something like a window sheet or something that doesn't absorb the ink. You know, like I wouldn't lay mine directly onto one of my, my sheets, my grid sheets, because you want your ink to bleed through. If your ink is bleeding through like this, you're doing it absolutely right. But see, where your ink's bleeding through, if you have a paper under you, that ink's going to keep bleeding all the way through. And you're going to lose color saturation. And you don't want to do that. So now, we'll take our dark pale papaya that we've listed here. Oops, we need our feather tip. And we're going to go right over that again. I usually just kind of go right to the end there. And we're going to go right over that line, that end of that feather. And there you go. You have a perfect transition. If you want, remember I was telling you sometimes you want to go back over it. If you go back over it, you're going to do the same thing. And all this is going to do is it's going to load up that paper, build up that color. And we're going to take our light pumpkin pie and do the same thing. Go over it one more time. And the good thing about Stampin' blends is they do saturate. They saturate very well. Okay? And there is a very nice blend for you. Okay, I went a little out of the line, but it's really not going to matter. So on the second technique, which is flicking, we're going to use the exact same colors, and we're going to do it in the box below here. So we have our dark pale papaya, our pumpkin pie, and our light pumpkin pie again. Now we're going to go to the bullet tip. Okay? And now this one, for this technique of blending, you're going to hold your marker a little bit more upright. It's going to be pretty much upright. Okay? Now when you're doing this, you do not need to press down. Because if you look, I'm just going to lay my marker here. See there? You barely need to touch your paper for ink to be transferred. And you press too hard on your tips, you may ruin them. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold our marker farther upright. We're going to put it down, and we're just going to do random little flicks, the same wrist, okay? And our flicks are going to be separated, okay? They're going to be separated. That is a flicking technique, okay? But we're going to do the same blending. This technique, like I said, is what you'll use for fur, for hair, maybe texture in a flower. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my little line right there. And now I'm going to do my flicks. We're still doing our thirds, but what we want is we want to leave space between those flicks. Okay? You want to carry them out farther and make sure you go over it, get good saturation, but we're going to leave those lines there. Now, we'll go to our next color, our light pumpkin pie. That's my light pumpkin pie. We're going to go to the bullet tip. We're going to do the exact same as we did here. We're going to go farther in, and we're just going to follow those lines. Follow them. Doesn't have to be perfect, but see how we kind of left. So, come on, camera, focus. Get my camera to focus here. Oh, it really doesn't want to. There we go. See how we have those clear lines in there? Or those, kind of white lines, texture. I am really sorry that doesn't want to focus. You can see it a little better there. Okay? Now we want to keep our ink wet, so I'm going to go ahead and get my pale papaya, my bullet tip, and I'm going to go my halfway in, and I'm going to carry those lines out. I might go to the end here. I'm just going to carry those lines out. And then you end up with a different type of texture, but it's still blended and faded. That is your flick stroke. Okay. So now, let's try, you know what? I'm going to show you how, if you only use, remember I said you have your two colors and you need to either add another light or another dark or another light to give you your dark midtone highlight. I'm going to show you how you can use just the two markers. So we're going to use pumpkin pie dark and light, but we're still going to get a darker shadow using the same marker. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to pull out my pale papaya out of that pile. I am going to bring in my dark smoky slate. Okay? And what I'm going to do, let's use, we're going to fill in our little register here. We got dark smoky slate. And then, now, you see me keep putting my lids on my pens. Let me explain that. I guess I should have explained it. Your marker is an alcohol marker. Alcohol evaporates very easily and very quickly. If you get in the habit of putting your lids back on your markers, they're going to last longer. It's kind of that simple. Later on, or toward the end of these series, I'm going to show you how you can rejuvenate these markers. If you think you're running out of ink or you accidentally left a lid off and it's dried out, you don't need to buy a new one. I'm going to show you how to rejuvenate them. So that's to come farther on. Squirrel. Boy, I just really all over the board here, aren't I? Sorry. Alright, so we've got our dark smoky slate. And now we've got our dark pumpkin pie. And we've got our light pumpkin pie. And as much as you look at that, go, well, how is that going to work? Wait until you see what happens. So we've got our dark pumpkin pie and our light pumpkin pie. We're going to take this smoky slate. I'm going to go ahead and use my bullet tip. You can use your bullet tip for feathering too, where you're still doing the whole feather thing here. You'll use your marker on the side, you'll use a bullet on the side, but the only difference is going to be you have your overlapping strokes are just a little more. Okay, so you can still do feathering with your bullet tip. Odds are, like I said, you're probably going to be using this bullet tip more often than you think, because we're doing small images and you need to have that space where you want to get your blends in there. Alright, so we're going to take, and on our first third, we're going to do our feathering with this smoky slate. Make sure you have your feathered end there. Now, we're going to go with our dark pumpkin pie, and we're going to go right over it, but we're going to carry it out a little more. Okay? Going right over it. And it will show up. Your orange is just going to become a darker orange. See there? It kind of turns it into like a Cajun Craze color, but what if you don't have Cajun Craze? You can make it darker in your color wheel there. So now we're going to take our light pumpkin pie. We're going to hold our marker just like we did the feather. Go into it. Make sure that you go over that line a few times so that it's just transitioned. It's not a stark line. And what if you want to add just a little more depth to that? We'll go back in with our dark pumpkin pie and go over it one more time. And there you go. Look at that. So you were able to create your highlights, darks, and shadows, or your highlights, shadows, and midtones with just one set of markers and a gray. And I really like, there's a lot of times that's going to come in really handy. Maybe if you're coloring a rose and you want the dark shadows in there to show up. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just do that with our flicking. And our dark, our next color, go right over it. Carry it out. Move to the light. And carry those lines out. You want to add a little more depth to that? Do your colors again. Remember, you on this method, you want to leave lines in there because it's going to give your image texture. Go right back over it with the same as we did. And there you go. Okay, now with that same idea in that concept, what if we wanted to use this, but we wanted to do a lighter highlight than our light pumpkin pie? Well, we can do that by going to our color chart in a closest one. Okay, it's not really going to be Calypso. That's kind of a real different color. It's definitely not into our Cajun Craze family. Maybe it's in our Pale Papaya here. It's not Mango Melody, but look how the orange goes. So you can do that. You can go lighter. Use one of those. Or you can use your blender to go into one lighter shade. But we aren't going to deal with the blender today. I'm going to do an entire session on your blender and what it's for. They call it a blender, but you actually don't use it to really blend your colors. It's more of a you know, the color lifter. So Stampin' Up! Did name it a color lifter, but a lot of people do use it to blend. And I will show you techniques with that. Let's see, what I remember what session that was. I think it's number 5, where I'm going to give you all kinds of techniques with the color lifter. So you want to go through your chart and create your color. And this will work really great as, you know, so you have it on hand. Let's do fur or hair. I'm going to show you how to do that using your new neutrals, okay? We're going to use 4 colors to create this neutral, and I'm going to show you how I picked those. Where is... So here's our neutrals, okay? And say like I want to create, maybe, let's pick one here. What colors do I have out here? My darkest is number 400 that I have here. So we have number 400, and if we wanted to keep the transition going, go diagonally. And we're going to add number 500, number 600, and maybe skip number 7 and go to 800. So if you follow your chart diagonally, so if you are way up here on number 300 and you wanted to make that dark fur, go diagonally. Follow your diamonds diagonally to get your colors to pick. Hopefully that made sense. So let's make our legend. And I'm going to start with obviously my darkest first, which is what numbers I got here? 4, 5, 6, and 8. So with their natural blends, the lower the number, the darker the color. So we're going to start with number 400 here. I'm going to go ahead and use my bullet tip so that you get used to doing that. If you want to use your feather tip, feel free. You can get more detail with your bullet tip, so it's totally up to you again how you want to work. I love using my feather tip. So this was number 400. Then we've got number 500. Got 500. 600. And we're going to add our fourth. Now you can use just those three. Work perfectly fine. But I'm going to show you, we're going to pull in a fourth color. So we'll do number 800 for our highlights. So this was number 800. And the other one was 5, 4, where's my other one? 6, okay. Oh, this should have been different. Should have been 4. No, okay, that's right, 600. Sorry, I should have written it down as I was doing it. Okay, we have our 4 colors. Let me get my window sheet under there. Now we want to create fur. Okay, I made a goober there. I'm going to show you something really quick. Your color lifter. And I'm going to erase that because I'm too OCD. Take your color lifter. Go in toward where you're trying to erase. So just lay it down, flick toward. That's it. Leave it alone. Because it's not going to lift it exactly right away. It's going to absorb into the paper and make it bleed away. So that is how you actually lift color. We will go into more detail later. Right now, we are going to create fur. So we're going to take our first marker, which is number 400, our dark shadow. I'm going to do the flicking for this one, so I want to put a little line there. I'm going to create our and carry them out farther. Don't forget, leave gaps. So that was our number 400. Now we're going to go to number 500. Go all the way into it and go right over those same lines. It's okay if they aren't exact, but you can go right over them. This kind of gets, you practice it, and it'll start to come to you naturally. So that was our 5. Now we need our 6, which is the next color. Go all the way in, and then we're going to carry it out a little bit past. And now we'll do our 800. Go all the way into those lines, just carry them out. And there you kind of have your fur. Look at that. It can be fur, it can be a texture on a flower, whatever you want. Well, maybe we want our fur to be a little darker, so we can actually eliminate that highlight, and we'll just do 3 colors. Matter of fact, I'll just do it with my feather tip. We got that is our 4. Now we're going to do our 5. I'm going to see how fast the feather tip is. It's very fast for doing if you're just trying to do a regular blend. Make sure you go all the way into your other color. And this has turned out to be a nice, smooth little color transition. And there you go. So you have the difference, how it can be fur or it can be a colored item. Okay. You can use these colors like browns to create the effects of metal can, or it's just great to do. Well, that is the basics of creating your blending exercise. So I want you to do your homework, and what you're going to do is you're going to practice doing your flicking. Okay? You're going to hold it upright and just lightly flick. Okay? Now you want to try to do it a little bit fast, because see, if you try to go slow, see how much thicker that is? Whereas if you just go like this, you have a nice little feathered out, and it goes faster. You can practice trying to do, circles. Maybe you're doing a curly dog or something. And then you're also going to practice your feather tip. Okay? Laying the marker more to its side and just overlapping. Go back and forth, overlapping, and still picking up to create that lighter edge. So you practice those, and I'm going to fill this in with some of my favorite color choices. So I'm going to probably do a greens family and a couple blues, things for skies, or maybe a couple more brown tones, and maybe a gray and black tone. So I'll fill this in. I will have it on the PDF at the end. But go ahead and do your homework. Practice with your blending strokes. Get used to it. And as you do this, it's just going to come natural to you. And by having this little color chart, you'll have your swatches already done. You'll know exactly what you want. I do want to show you something also you can do. Maybe you want this little area to be a little bit more highlighted, or more highlights to it. You can take the feather tip of your color lifter and just flick back just a couple times. Just a couple times. That's it. And if you look at that in a few minutes, it's really going to be a nice highlight. But it'll still be the same color theme we wanted. So that's just, we will get into the highlighter more. I'm going to do a whole session on techniques and lifting and removing boo-boos and so on and so forth. So go ahead. I've got this PDF down there below for you. Pull out your Stampin' Blends charts and color away. Have fun. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email or ask me on my Facebook page, whatever you got, and I will do my best to answer it. Now remember, do what's comfortable to you. If you want to do dark to light, do dark to light. If you want to try doing light to dark, you do that. You figure out what works for you. Because sometimes the lefties, left-hand people, they prefer light to dark. You never know. So it's your personal preference. Maybe change it up a couple times going through your sheet. See which way you like the way your colors blend. You may like it better a certain way. So go ahead and practice those. Oh, you know what I forgot to show you on this? I was almost done, but I forgot to show you tip to tip. Say like you have your two colors and they don't have something that's going to give you a lighter or darker mid-tone that's going to be in the same color family. If you do tip to tip, it will give you the third color you need for your highlights, darks, and highlights, midtones, and shadows. So for a good example is this Cajun Craze. What I'm going to do, I think that's Cajun Craze. What do I got here? So if you look at my Cajun Craze, and I'm trying to find maybe a color in between that dark and light. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another marker in the same sort of color tone family, and I'm going to create that mid-tone. So in this case, I'm going to grab my light Calypso Coral, and I'm going to create a tone that goes between these two colors of Cajun Craze. So to do that, I've got my Cajun Grays, and I'm going to grab my light Calypso Coral. Where is it? Here it is. So I've got my 3 colors. And our dark, mid-tone, and light is a little bit off kilter. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our dark. So this is going to be dark Calypso Coral. Now we're going to do our light Calypso. And then we're going to write, what is the name of this one? Light. Wait, where's our other one? Wait, I think I did that wrong. But that's okay. Dark Cajun Craze. Sorry, I labeled them wrong. So it's Dark Cajun, Light Cajun, and then Light Calypso. Sorry about that. It's early. Alright, so we got our Dark Cajun. We got our Light Cajun. And our Light Calypso, I'm going to write mix. I'm going to write mix on my sheet. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Light Cajun, the feather tip. You could do it with the bullet too. And I'm going to take my Light Calypso feather tip, and I'm going to touch the light feather tip to the other marker. My tip's a little messed up. I use it a lot. And what that's going to do, I might even be able to do it with my bullet tip. So I'm going to take my bullet tip of my light Calypso, touch it to my other marker, and it's going to give me a different mid-tone that's not too light. See what I mean? So you kind of end up with a better mid-tone. It's not going to hurt your marker. When you're done, take your marker, just wipe it off on a piece of paper, and the colors are back to normal. So let's go ahead and try it the way we would do it. So we're going to take, this is my light. Let's take my dark Calypso, or dark Cajun. We're going to do our feathering with our bullet tip, where we just kind of layer it through really nice. And a nice saturation of color there. It's nice and wet. Grab our next color, which is our light Cajun. Overlap. Pulling it out. Pulling that color. And then we're going to take that lighter marker, which was our Calypso Coral. We're going to touch, oh, you know what? I'm going to change that. I want to use, oh, I was right. Sorry, I was right. I'm using the same light Cajun. And I'm going to touch my tip to that tip, and it's going to give me my last color. Go over that line, get rid of that line. And see how that gave us a really nice transition? So basically you can create and mix your colors to come up with the other color you want. Okay? So that came out perfect. Sorry about all that. I guess I had a little bit of a brain fart there. Alright, practice some of these. Practice maybe mixing a couple of them. and see if you get a different tone that you want. Say like you have an old Call Me Clover. There's really no better dark or light to go with that would match. You might be able to get some mint macaron in there to come close. You don't need to. Take your dark one or your light one and mix it with another color down here. Pick one that you think is in the closest color family. So you would take this marker and mix it with your light of that one, and you'll come up with your highlight shadow for that one. Hopefully that made sense. If it doesn't, we will be going over it more later, or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Like I said, I am teaching you merely what I'm self-taught. There's no right or wrong, and I'm by no means a professional. I'm just teaching what I learn or what I know and how I color. So now that you've completed your blend sheet, your practice blends exercise, you should come out with something like this. I kind of mixed and made something from each color family. You may find that most of your coloring, you'll tend to go to reds or greens or something like that. You could make a couple of these and make your color blends and practice your flicking and maybe practice your tip to tip. So anyway, we've got that done. I'm going to give you one more exercise to do in this episode where we are going to bring in everything you've learned so far, okay? So I'm going to give you a little worksheet of these bows, and you'll see by the ones I colored here, we've got our blending in there, we've got our cast shadows in there, some more shadows to create the form. So we went from a flat bow to look how puffy and how much dimension these have by just adding where you do your shadows. Maybe doing a little bit of flick on the tail of that bow gives it a highlight like it's curved. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to do one of them for you. I'm going to color one for you. Go ahead and print the PDF and try putting together everything we've learned so far. The light source, where our light's coming from, our highlights, our darks. Give it a try. So let's jump in. I'm going to zoom the camera in, and I'm going to show you how I color something like these bows. Oops, I guess I need to move into screen here. Okay, so now, first off, I want to pick my colors, okay? And you can do that using the chart you just made, okay? I don't have my other red one over here. I've got, that one might work, but I'm going to go ahead. What I have here is I have my dark cherry cobbler, my light cherry cobbler, and for my highlight, I'm going to go ahead and bring in the light real red. So, coloring the way I do from dark to light, I'm going to use the nib tip or the bullet tip of my marker, and I'm going to create the outline of my image, so to speak. I'm going to create where we're going to build from. So remember I told you watch what the artist is showing you. So we already know that the artist is saying there's a shadow right there. So we're going to hit that with our dart. Now this little knot here in the bow is obviously going to be above the bow edges, correct? So we're going to add a shadow right there. Okay, so that's making this part pop above the folds of the bow. So now we also know that the bow is overlapping its tails, so let's add a shadow there. And remember what I said, move your paper around to what's comfortable for you, okay? Now, on these, I wanted to give a little bit of texture to the knot. Okay, I can leave the knot plain, but look at these. If you add just a little bit of shading to those, it'll give that crinkled look. So I'm just going to take and go 1, 2, 3, leaving some white in there. And I'll go 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now our bow has, where it's tied, see this little indent right here? We're going to create a shadow there to give this part of our bow some contour. So what I'll do is I'll just make a little V right there. I'm going to carry it up just a little bit. There we go. Now we know the inside of that bow has some shadow. But if our light is hitting here, it's going to have shadow there, maybe a little light right in the middle there where it's hitting, and then dark again. So let's do that. We're going to do that by doing a little. That's all we need to do. And there you go. So now our ribbon still has some, our tag still has a little contour right here maybe. Basically what we're doing is we're creating our roadmap. Okay? I'm going to add just a slight bit of feather off the edge of those. Alright, let's go to our mid-tone. So our mid-tone on this one is going to be our light cherry cobbler. So we're just going to, if I can get the lid off. So now we're going to go over the lines we've already made and just bring them out a little bit. Okay? So you're going to go over them and kind of blend that edge is what you're doing. You're just going to bring it out a little bit farther. On this one, remember I told you we have the little flicks there to create like the illusion that it's curved. So to do that, I'm going to go here in the corner, do a couple little flicks, do a couple little flicks this way, and we figure our light is going straight across them. Blend out our little V a little bit. Do the same thing on this side. And where your little flicks end is where the light is reflecting on that ribbon piece. So you do use, your feathering and your flicking often in the same image. Okay, let's continue on carrying out our color. Now remember, we have some highlights where that bow is curved, okay? So when we flick into where that highlight's going to be. As you practice doing these kind of things, it really will start to just kind of come natural, where you're just going to go, oh yeah, I should flick there, or I should blend there. Everything takes practice. If you don't get it right the first time, don't worry about it. Really, you're coloring. When you were a little kid and you got your first coloring book, did you care what it looked like? You didn't. So just practice a little bit. So there we have basically our roadmap of our bow. Got to carry that out a little bit. I'll do a little bit here to blend out those creases. And now, we're going to bring in our light real red to give us our highlights. I want to use my bullet tip. Now we're just going to blend out those edges. So that way you don't have harsh lines, you have a smooth transition. And see how that ribbon looks like it's curled? We're smoothing out those lines. Go all the way into your other color. So that'll help blend it. And when you're doing the flicking, I'll show this up close, it's going to give your ribbon a texture. You know, some ribbon, even satin ribbon, has a texture to it. Look at that. There you go, look at that. See how just adding your shading gives you more depth? If you want to give a little bit more definition to this one, I'm going to bring the light cherry cobbler back in, and I'm going to add just a little bit more highlight in some areas for more shadow and depth. Oops, that went outside my line. That's okay. This is what I'm going to do. I'll grab my color lifter and I'll just barely hit those little spots I went out of the line. Make sure when you do this, you do not take the color lifter into your actual color. You only want it to be on your spots that you accidentally did a boo-boo. What color's this one? Ooh, can't get the lid off my marker. I wanted to add just a little bit right here. There we go. And there is your bow. Now remember, we can do a cast shadow on this. Right? If our light's coming from here, our darkest would be on this side of the ribbon. Go a little ways up. Go around. You just need a real thin line. Now the thicker the line, remember what I told you about cast shadow? It's going to be real thin when it's close, and then it's going to get wider and thicker the farther your image is away. Okay? So if you want this to really be popping up high off your page, your shadow would be wider. And we really don't need it to do that. I'm going to add a little shadow on the bottom edge here because our light's coming from here, which means the the bow is shadowing it. So I'm going to draw my thin line. See how it gives that depth? I mean, it really just kind of pops it off the page. I use this cast shadow technique a lot. I use it with my grays. I use it with my real pale blues if I'm doing the flower. Then I'm going to just take my color lifter here, and I'm just going to smooth that, just barely hit that edge of that. And it just gets rid of that harsh edge. You know how a shadow fades? That's all that's going to do. I'm also going to use it to fix a boo-boo I did right there. And there you go. So I've got a PDF of this bow sheet below, or below, I think it's below the video. Print out a couple pieces on the basic white. After you finish your blending chart, pick colors you did here, and that'll work. If you don't want it, you can't figure out a third color, take your two colors, cherry cobbler and cherry cobbler, and then if you need your third color, like you need something between the dark and the light, do your tip to tip. Do your light cherry cobbler tip to the dark cherry cobbler tip, and it will give you your midtone. So hopefully that made sense and you enjoyed today's series. I hope that you will join me again next week for our next episode, which is, what is our next episode? I believe our next episode is two-tone stamping, or two-tone coloring and blending. So go ahead and do your worksheets and your homework, and I really hope to see you next week. Have a happy stamping day and stay safe out there. Bye-bye now.